Ajam nirvikalpam nirakaramekam niraman anandamadvaita purnam param nirgunam nirvishesham niriham parabrahma rupam ganesham bhajema. Hari Om, Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Friends, Namaste and a hearty welcome to one and all for today's 116th session of verse by verse Bhagavad Gita. From 24th, Navaratri is starting during this auspicious period when the positive energy is elevated. It's ideal time for introspection and prayers. We invoke the energy aspect of God in the form of the Universal Mother, commonly referred to as Durga. Navaratri is 9 nights and night means darkness. But what is this darkness? It is the darkness of ignorance. The purpose of Navaratri celebration is to enable man to get rid of 9 types of darkness which have taken hold of him. Unified form of Durga symbolizing Tamoguna, Lakshmi, Rajoguna, and Saraswati, Sattvaguna. Together they signify Devi and together represent Shakti. As Prakriti, nature is made up of these 3 gunas. Our prayer during this period is to get control over them. To get rid of this darkness of gunas, we observe Navaratri by cultivating the triple purity of thought, word, and deed. With that, on behalf of Param Vedanta, I again extend a warm welcome to one and all for today's 116th session of Bhagavad Gita, verse by verse. Continuing study of Purushottama Yoga, chapter 15 of Bhagavad Gita, verses 16 to 20 shall be explained by our team of Param Vedanta teachers, and these verses shall be chanted at the end of the presentation. Let us commence with a recap of the previous session by Dr. Vikram Kekkatpure. Over to Dr. Vikram, please.
Hari Om, Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Next slide. In first 6 verses, Shri Krishna spoke about the samsara. Identifying with the body and the world alone leads to samsara and unhappiness. Moksha is dropping this false notion of body identification and claiming the Brahman identity. This is not a physical event, but a cognitive or intellectual event gained by jnanam. This requires a strong and prepared mind, which is achieved by following 4 disciplines of Vairagya, Sadguna, Sharanagati, and Atma Vichara. Brahman can be appreciated in every activity. The sentient principle. Swamiji gives example of fan. When fan is rotating, there are 2 things happening. One is the physical fan and the electricity which is moving it. Both the perception and perceived are the manifestation of Brahman. An immature person asks for proof of God, but for a prepared mind, Lord is present in chetana jivas, living being, or achetana prapancha, non-living things. In this section, the first topic of discussion is that Brahman is present in every living being as Chidabhasa or reflected consciousness. As Sri Krishna declares, I am that Chidabhasa or Brahman, discussed in verses 7 to 11. Second topic, Sri Krishna elaborates further, states that the Brahman alone is the manifestation as Jagat and the Jagat Karana. So in verse 11, Sri Krishna says, Yogi or those with prepared mind recognize the presence of Brahman within the body-mind complex. Yogis develop discriminative mind by following path of Karma Yoga, Upasana Yoga, and finally attain Jnanam under guidance of a competent guru. Sri Krishna has used 2 verses to describe Ajnani in this verse. Akrutatmana, those who are not qualified, unrefined mind, and achetasa, without discriminating intellect. Such people are not able to recognize Lord's presence in their heart. Even if such people try scriptural studies, without purity of mind, it is just an academic exercise. Next slide, please. Verse 12. Sri Krishna in next few verses discusses divine presence in achetana prapancha. So Sri Krishna talks about three essential natural forces, Surya, Chandra and Agni. Surya Teja or power or energy illuminates entire universe. Moonlight, which we know is a reflected light, is also God's Lord's grace. And the fire or the Agni Shakti. The greatness of each of these Shaktis is elaborated in following verses. Next slide, please. Verse 13. The sunlight, as it covers the earth, it provides nourishment to all living beings. Sunlight is not only the source of energy, but it's essential for life. There cannot be life without sun. And numerous diseases will happen because of lack of sunlight. The energy is so powerful. It can be harvested and used, such as solar power. This source of eternal power has been provided by Lord free of cost to all beings. This is the reason the ancient Indians started the day by Surya Puja. This Surya Shakti, Sri Krishna says, he is also the moonlight. According to the Shastras, moonlight provides nourishment to plant kingdom. Next slide, please. Verse 14. In this verse, Lord is glorifying Agni Shakti. According to Shastra, Agni Shakti is in two forms, external fire or Bhaya Shakti, and second one is inside our body or Antaragni, also called as Vaishwanara Agni. The food we eat is digested inside the body and converted into protein, carbohydrate, etc., which can be absorbed and provides nourishment to the body. That fire in the body which converts this is the Antara Shakti. Just as we need to fan the external fire to keep it burning. Similarly, according to Shastra, the respiratory movement of air breathing in, that is apana, or breathing out, that is prana, fans the internal Agni. In scientific term, more the activity, there is increased respiratory effort, and as the calories are consumed, hunger is stimulated. Next slide, please. Therefore, Shastras and many great saints have called this Agni as Yajna and the food as the oblation given to this Yajna. Swami Ramdas says, eating should not be considered as an activity just to fill the stomach, but it is a Yajna karma. Next slide, please. Sri Krishna further state that this Agni is essential for digestion of all types of food. Swamiji elaborates the 4 types of food. Bhaksham are the solid foods which require chewing and mastication. Bhojjam, directly swallowed. Food such as liquid food. Layam, leaked and swallowed, like honey. Choksiam, which needs to be sucked, like sugarcane. Next slide, please. Verse 15, Sri Krishna concludes this topic by declaring he is the Brahman, the creator of the world. He resides in the heart of every being. Therefore, each body is like a temple. Heart where the God, Lord reside is Garbhagruha. Sri Krishna elaborates that everyone is sentient and by the consciousness principle Brahman, which includes the functioning of the mental faculties. Jnanam here, which is referred as a mental faculty, as a faculty to learn, both the Vedantic as well as the material knowledge. Smriti is the memory power to recall the learning, and very important faculty is to forget certain things. Apohanam, it is required, for example, to forget painful experiences. Swamiji further explains that this can be compared to 3 states of Jagrut, Swapna and Sushupti. Hence, Brahman also represents the 3 states. With this, Sri Krishna concludes the discussion of intellectual shift needed to identify Brahman in Chetan as well as Achetan Prapancha. And this is achieved by claiming, I am that Brahman. Hari Om.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vikram Kekatpure, for a nice explanation of those 5 verses from this chapter of Puruṣottama Yoga. And this also does highlight such a beautiful chapter that we are getting into again and again. Om Sadashiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om. We continue the study of the last 5 verses of this chapter, Purushottama Yoga. To have a context, all living beings depend on me for the fruits of action, said Sri Krishna. And he also said that the wise also for the fruits of their knowledge depend on me. So we must serve the Lord with bhakti. We must go beyond all the gunas through knowledge to attain liberation, explains Sri Adi Shankara in his Bhashya. And thus knowledge of the real self is the next step after having explained the Gunatraya Vibhaga Yoga. In this chapter, we go now specifically in these last 5 verses, the explanation of the real self as Purushottama. We have understood by now that the problem of transmigration was samsara, that the solution was moksha sadhanani. There was an explanation of Brahman as everything, Brahma sarvatmakatvam. And now we will understand that Brahman is Purushottama, Brahman Purushottamatvam, and the benefit which is Brahma Phala Jnanam. So we understand that for freedom from mental weakness, we should have the freedom from samsara. Krishna describes 4 disciplines, and amongst them, the most important is Vairagyam and Sharanagati. Of course, Sadgunas and the Atma Vichara is extremely important to go through this ladder of spiritual sadhanas. The moksha sadhanani, which was described in the verses 3 to 6, clearly mentions that Brahman is pure consciousness, formless, all-pervading, objectifies everything but is the unobjectifiable subject. To understand it better, it is the witness chaitanyam, it is satyam jnanam anantam brahma, the only source of strength in the entire creation. For that matter, it is your inner higher real nature. It is on that you fall back on every time. It is you fall back on yourself and not on that cardboard chair. This Brahma Prapti is moksha, which is the transformation of the mind. Brahman Sarvatmatvam has been explained in the verses 7 to 15 as Brahman alone appears and manifests. Brahman is the only substance. Consciousness alone differentiates into different Nama Rupa. And it is this intangible consciousness which manifests as the tangible material universe. In other words, the Sadrupa of Brahman, which is insentient universe, is the manifest Jagat. The Chidrupa remains as unmanifest insentient. And when there is a combination of the existence, the Sat nature and the consciousness or the Chit nature, that Sadrupa plus Chidrupa manifests as a sentient Jiva. We come to these verses 16 to 18, which explains Brahman as the Purushottamavattam. Manifest matter is visible to the organs, sense organs. The unmanifest matter is the imperceptible, intangible, not matter but energy. But there's something more distinct from this, which is the unmanifest matter, which is the original consciousness. So Kṣara Purusha is the form, Akṣara Purusha and the reflected consciousness is the formless, and beyond that is the Uttama Purusha. In these verses, Saguna Krishna is explaining the formless Purushottama and telling us that that is the real Krishna. Brahma Jnanam has been explained in the last 2 verses. In this session, the Grihastha and Sannyasi have to go through Brahma Jnanam to derive the mental strength. And the destination for all is Jnanam. The benefit is to have total fulfillment and a very meaningful life. That is the purpose of all this study. May I now request Dr. Netra to kindly explain the 16th verse of this chapter in today's session.
Namaste, Hari Om, Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. With the 15th verse, which was completed in the last class, Lord Krishna completes the importance topic of Brahmana Sarvatmakatvam. It means that Brahman alone is in the form of everything. Everything is Brahman with different names and forms, which cause only a superficial difference. So the world is superficially different, but in essence, the whole world is Brahman. There is nothing other than Brahman. In the following three verses, 16, 17, and 18, Krishna gives the definition of the word puruṣottama, and based on this word alone, the very chapter is called Purushottama Yoga. So coming to the verse 16, Dvamimau puruṣau loke kṣaraṣ eva ca kṣaras sarvani bhutani kūtastokṣara uchyate. This means the perishable and the imperishable. These are the two purushas in the world. The perishable is in the form of all beings. The imperishable is said to be the deceptive Maya. Lord Krishna divides the whole universe into three portions or three components. The first portion is the visible universe, which is accessible, perceptible to our sense organs. This visible, tangible universe is one component, which we call it as the manifest matter. This is made up of matter, that is Panchabhutani, Akasha, Vayu, Apaha, Prithvi, and all of them are matter, inert matter principle. Therefore, the first component is manifest matter, shortened and Krishna gives a technical name, Kṣara puruṣaḥ. Then Krishna talks about the second component. When matter is destroyed, it will get converted into unmanifest form. Some may call it energy form, but it is the invisible, intangible, unmanifest form. And therefore, at the time of total destruction of this universe, that is pralaya, the matter will continue not in the form of manifest matter, but it will survive in the form of unmanifest matter. So, unmanifest matter, which is also inert in nature, is the second component, and Krishna gives the technical name for this as Akṣara puruṣaḥ. The word Akṣara puruṣaḥ is usually used for Nirguna Brahma or consciousness. But here, unmanifest matter may be called as energy. In another context, it is called Maya, because in Vedanta, Maya is unmanifest universe, unmanifest matter, and that Maya tatvam is unmanifest matter principle. And since this Maya, it is kūtastaha, relatively eternal. Then the third component of the entire cosmos is the consciousness principle, chetana tatvam, because according to our scriptures, consciousness is distinct from matter, and this independent consciousness is the third component. This conscious principle Krishna names Uttama puruṣaḥ or Supreme puruṣaḥ SM. So, though these three distinctions have been made, it is only for our understanding, but we all know that both the manifest and unmanifest matter, Kṣara and Akṣara puruṣahas, are actually part of the Uttama puruṣaḥ. Let us see certain important differences among them. Kṣara, Akṣara puruṣahas are both matter. One is manifest, other is unmanifest. It is inert with properties or attributes, saguna, subject to modification, savikaram, subject to division, savikalpam, does not have an independent existence of its own called nitya. Whereas Uttama puruṣaḥ is chetana tatvam, sentient, free from all the attributes, nirguna tatvam, cannot undergo modification, nirvikaram, cannot be divisible, nirvikalpam, and finally Uttama puruṣaḥ, the conscious principle, has independent existence and therefore called satya. Just as a screen lends existence to the movie drama going on, similarly Uttama puruṣaḥ lends existence to the Kṣara, Akṣara puruṣaḥ drama going on, which is called creation, destruction. So of these three components, Krishna says that the third component is a supreme one, because that is Sarvadaram, Vishwadaram, Gagana Sadrusham. The Uttama puruṣaḥ, the consciousness alone, is my real nature. By reversing the two words, Uttama puruṣaḥ, reversed, Purusha Uttama, Purushottama, trayam Purushottama, the Nirguna Chetana. This is the saram or the essence. In summary, this 16th verse describes the two of the three components of the universe, Kṣara puruṣaḥ and Akṣara puruṣaḥ. which are the manifest and unmanifest matter. And the subsequent verse covers the Uttama Purusha. Thank you.
That was a nice explanation of the 16th verse. If I can make a few mentions on this, the 12th verse says, Jagat bhasate akhilam, and that is, know me to be the light, the splendor of Narayana, and that light is nothing but Chaitanya or consciousness. The same has been explained as Kṣara and Akṣara. The imperishable, this is Maya Shakti, which is latent. It is an illusion, and it is a power of the Lord from where the perishable takes birth. This unmutable, imperishable is known as kūtastha, the word that is used here. Kūta is illusion, and kūtastha means that which manifests in various forms as an illusion, which is the seed of samsara. Maybe we would remember that in the 12th chapter, in the 3rd verse, there is a phrase, Sarvatra achintyam kūthastham achalam dhruvam, and kūthastha there meant changeless. The 17th verse is Uttamaḥ puruṣaḥ paramatme yudathyah yo lokatrayam avishya bibhartya avyaya ishvaraha. The meaning is, different from these is the Supreme Purusha, who is said to be the Supreme Self, which pervades and sustains the three worlds. This is the imperishable Lord. Anyatuhu means different from these, and these means the Akṣara and Akṣara Purusha, is the Uttama Purusha, who is the Supreme Purusha. Udartihiti is said to be the Paramatma, the Supreme Self. And what does he do? Ya avishyaha. Bibharti, he sustains. And whom does he sustain? Lokatrayam. And he is the Avyaya Ishvaraha, which is the imperishable Lord. To understand, Anyaha is the chetana tatvam, which is other than the Akṣara and the Akṣara Purusha, which is the Uttama Purusha, who is Chaitanya, Nirguna, Nirvikara, Nirvikalpam, Satyam, Advitiyam. We have and will understand that Akṣara and Akṣara are the Mithya. So this Paramatme Dudartha means the consciousness principle, which is Paramatma. Question is, Paramatme Dudartha Taha, and the answer would be Paramatme Lokatraya Avishya. The role of this Uttama Purusha is it pervades, penetrates all the three worlds. And this Lokatrayam in this context means all the Kṣara and the Akṣara Purusha. Not only does it pervade, but it also sustains, supports, and lends existence, Vibharti. And it does it in a very subtle, Avyaya, in a manner that even though pervades, even though sustains, it does not, consciousness does not undergo any change and remains unaffected. Such a master of matter is Swatantra, is independent. And that is the meaning of the phrase Ishvaraha. So the consciousness is the real God or Ishvaraha. Now it is nice to understand that distinct from the above two is the Upadhis. So Kṣara and Akṣara are the Upadhis of the main Purusha. And this Kṣara and Akṣara is a Jada Rashi. Ultimately, it is a Jada Rashi. And this Avidya, which is responsible for all the Panchakoshas, we have to move beyond that to understand this Parama Purusha. Tadham Paramam Padam. That is what is the ultimate. May I now request Chetana ma'am to kindly explain the 18th verse of this chapter.
Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. So we've seen that in verses 16 to 18, Krishna is classifying the world into three components: Kṣara Purusha, Akṣara Purusha, and Uttama Purusha. And in the next slide, we'll see that the 18th verse, Krishna is defining the third component, the Purushottama or Uttama Purushottama. He says, Yasmat Shara Atito Aham Aksharad Apicho Uttamaha Ato Asmi Loke Vedecha Pratitaha Purushottamaha. So he's saying yasmat, since aham atitaha, I am beyond. Beyond what? Ksharam, kṣara purusha, apicha uttamaḥ, and superior to aksharat, akṣara purushaḥ. Ataha, therefore, asmi prasitaha, I am well known. Well known where? Loke, in the world, cha vede, in and in the Vedas. And well known as what? Well known as Puruṣottamaḥ. In the next slide, Krishna declares, since I am beyond kṣara purusha and even superior to akṣara purusha, therefore I am well known in the world and in the Vedas as Puruṣottamaḥ, which is the same as Uttama Purushaha or consciousness or Brahman. Next slide, please. So what Krishna wants to convey is that this consciousness or his higher nature is superior to all forms of energy, both manifest and unmanifest, that is kṣara and akṣara purusha. Now, what exactly are these three components? We can use the metaphor of the wave and ocean to understand these three aspects. Waves represent kṣara purusha, the perishable manifest world. Ocean represents the akṣara purusha, the unmanifest matter, which is Maya. Water represents Puruṣottamaḥ. So the very existence of waves and ocean is water, is because of water. In the same way, the very basis of this entire universe is consciousness or Brahman, or as Krishna calls it, Puruṣottamaḥ. Next slide, please. Now, when Krishna claims he is Puruṣottamaḥ and is beyond all forms of matter, which aspect of Krishna is he referring to? Saguna or Nirguna? Here, we should be clear that it is not a reference to Krishna Shariram or Saguna Krishna. He is referring to the Nirguna Krishna, who is Chaitanya Swarupa. And therefore, Krishna says, Arjuna, that consciousness is me. Do not look at my body. My body is kṣara purusha. Then who am I? I am the consciousness in everything and superior to everything. I am the supporter of all. That is my nature, real nature. Next slide, please. Shankaracharya also says in his Vashyam, Lord Krishna here says, since I, the Nirguna Chaitanyam, am superior to kṣara purusha, which is the manifest world or the samsara tree, and also superior to akṣara purusha, which is Maya, the seed of the samsara tree. Therefore, I am called superior most, Uttama Purushaha. Thus, Krishna declares that the goal of every seeker is to gain the knowledge of Puruṣottama, his higher nature or real nature. With this, Krishna concludes the definition of the word Puruṣottamaḥ. And because of this reason alone, this chapter is called Puruṣottama Yoga. Thank you. Hari Om.
Thanks, Chetana ma'am, for a very nice explanation, particularly of this word Puruṣottama. And would like to just reinforce the Bhashyam, where Adi Shankara says, I transcend the perishable tree of illusionary samsara called Ashwatha. I also transcend the imperishable seeds of the tree of illusionary samsara. And so I am known as the Uttama Purusha in Vedaha. Sa Uttama Purushaha. In the Taittiriya, there is a phrase, Brahma Pritcham Prathishtham, which means Brahman is the origin of everything. And that is how the word Puruṣottama came. There is also a little explanation given by Madhusudana Saraswati about this particular phrase. Karya Rupa Vinashi is Ashwatha. Maya Rupa Samsara is the Vriksha. And this Karana of this seed is Maya, which is Avyakta. And these upadhis have to be removed before we understand the Puruṣottama. May I now request Dr. Sundar to please explain the 19th verse of this chapter.
Hari Om, Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha. In this next slide, let us see the verse. Yo mam evam asammudaha janati purushottamam sasarva vidbhajati mam sarva bhavena bharata. In this next slide, we have a bird's eye view of this chapter, which has already been explained before in this today's presentation. In the words of Pujya Swami Paramarthananda ji, if we don't value the destination, we do not value the means. With the purpose that we value the destination moksha, so that we then value the means, Lord Krishna started off this chapter by samsara dosha darshanam. Samsara nivritti upayas were then presented. Then this chapter has a spectacular vision of Brahman alone appearing as Jiva and Brahman alone appearing as Jagat, reinforcing Advaitam for us so that we can do Nididhyasanam on this section of the chapter. Then the narration moved on to the description of kṣara, Akṣara, and Uttamaḥ. We have seen in the foregone verses Uttamaḥ being described as anya, other than, atita, beyond. What is the meaning of Uttamaḥ being beyond kṣara and Akṣara? Is it beyond in the sense of time, like it is not this time, it is tomorrow? Or is it beyond in terms of space, like it is not Bangalore, it is Mysore? It is not that way. What we have to understand is that the Uttamaḥ is immanent. He is in and through. He is inescapably intimate to kṣara and Akṣara. Why is that so? Because the Uttamaḥ is seen as the cause. Any effect is intimate to the cause, inseparably intimate. Although he is immanent, in and through in this manner, the Uttamaḥ is also transcendent, meaning to say that he is unaffected in whatsoever manner by the kṣara and Akṣara. How to understand this? So Uttamaḥ is described as vivarta upadana karanam, meaning to say that he is such a cause for kṣara and Akṣara that he is changeless. When a seed transforms to a tree, a seed no longer remains. Whereas Brahman is a cause. When you transform into the effect, either kṣara or Akṣara, Brahman remains changeless. What does that mean? It means that kṣara and Akṣara both are actually mithya. They are kevala namarupa. Therefore, he is the changeless vivarta upadana karanam. And Jagat, whether it is kṣara or Akṣara, is mithya. What is the fruit of this knowledge is now the topic of this section, this and the next verse. Now, in this next slide, let us look at the composition of this verse. I would like to draw your attention to the circles here, yaha and saha. These are correlative pronouns. If and then kind of an understanding they bring about between the two lines in this verse. If you look at the subject and the verb, yaha janati, saha bhajati. This is the simplest form of this verse. So it describes a subject who knows something and therefore he has a particular way of worship. What does this subject know? This subject is also described as asammodaha. And what does the subject know? He knows Mam, which refers to Krishna. In what manner? Does he know him as Ekarupa, Vishwarupa, or Arupa? It's clearly mentioned here that he knows him as Puruṣottama. We have just now seen that Puruṣottama is that immanent, transcendent principle, Advaitam, Ekam, Kaivalyam. That kind of an understanding this person has. And for this reason alone, he is called as asammodaha. Asammodaha is free from delusion. This refers to a term which encompasses all the sadhanas. Through karma upasana yoga, he has got jnana, yogyata, prapti, sadhana, chatustaya, sampatti. Then he has been fortunate to have a guru sampradaya benefit. He has done shravana, manana, nididhyasanam. So asammodaha encompasses all this. Therefore alone, janati, he has this knowledge of Krishna as Uttamaḥ. And such a person in the second line is described as sarvavid. Sarvavid, it means he knows everything. Why is that so? Everything here actually means kṣara and akṣara, which were previously described. If he knows puruṣottama, obviously he knows kṣara and akṣara, because if you know gold, you know all the ornaments. If you know wood, you know all the furniture. If you know water, you know the ocean and wave. So in that manner, he is sarvavid. He knows all. Not just that, he knows all as himself, because Brahman alone is, that is my core essence also. That singular entity is there. Therefore, he knows everything as himself also. I know everything as myself also. Then in the second line, such a person, sarva bhavena mam bhajati. So he worships Krishna in a particular way. Sarva bhavena. Sarva here refers to totality, worship in a wholehearted manner. This refers to Advaitam. His worship is of the form of a singular reality, which we have already seen as Ekam, Advitiyam, Advaitam. So therefore, this form of worship in the language of the 7th chapter refers to the Jnani Bhakta or the Parabhakta in the 12th chapter language. So to conclude, in this next slide, this verse says, the undeluded, which we have already seen as somebody who has traveled through all the sadhanas, a jnani, thus knows me as Puruṣottama, the singular reality. He is the knower of all, and he worships all as me. Asammudaha has a reason why this particular word is chosen in this verse to say that the mudaha pursues the kṣara and akṣara, whereas the asammudaha pursues the Puruṣottama. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for a very nice explanation, Dr. Sundar. I would probably like to lay a little more stress upon this immanent and transcendent, which is very clearly brought out by you. Also about this word mam. And here, as we read the verse, it looks as though Krishna is telling Arjuna. But the very important factor is that mam means all-supporting, all-pervading Supreme Purusha. Asammudaha is the one who has already done nididhyasana. And so the knowledge is doubt-free. There is no misapprehensions, absolutely no delusion. And mam, what he is mentioning probably means one should recognize Sri Krishna as he is telling Arjuna to be the Puruṣottama himself, not like an ordinary person like Sri Krishna. And only then that person would be a sarvavid. Very nicely brought out. May I now request Dr. Srinivas Nuti to kindly give us the explanation of the 20th verse of this chapter.
Hari Om, sir. Iti guhyatamam shastram idamuktam maya nagha etad buddhva buddhiman syat kritakrutyascha bharata. This is the verse. Let us see the meaning of each word. In the first line, iti. Iti means thus. So here, iti is a closing word, whereas atha is a opening verse, prarambha vachakam. Atha brahma jijnasa, like that the Brahma Sutra starts. Atha yoga anushasanam. The Patanjali Yoga Shastras also starts with the atha. So whenever somebody is telling iti, means he is concluding. So, but here we are only in the 15th chapter. So more or less the main message has been given. So the remaining 3 more chapters are there. They are called Parisishta Adhyayas. So that means Krishna is, the Lord Krishna is explaining some more, probably a few points which he wants to highlight, or a few points which Arjuna had some question mark face, which he couldn't ask. So those things are explained. So overall, iti means this is the almost like the main message has been given. This is the mugimpu vachakam, that is the closing word. So next word is guhyatamam. Guhyatamam means most secret. Guhyam, guhyataram, guhyatamam. Guhyam means secret. Guhyataram means more secret. Guhyatamam means most secret. That is ati rahasyam, most secret. Here we should, why he is calling this shastram as most secret shastram? Krishna, not that it should not be told to anybody or everybody like that. So this science, it does not reveal by itself to an ordinary man. For an ordinary person like us or like Arjuna, it has to be told by a guru. Otherwise, it doesn't reveal itself. Even now, even if we tell this shastram to a adhikari, the practical aspect is still the secret. With all the internet availability, we can just read the theory, but it is not possible unless we have a guiding of a guru. It is even now it is still secret. The practical aspect is still a secret. For example, as a surgeon or as a neurosurgeon, if you want to operate like clipping of aneurysm, one of the most complicated cases in neurosurgery, so how much ever we read, it is impossible to operate. So the guru has to literally guide us. Our teachers have to literally guide us and practically hold our hands and clip the aneurysm. In the same way, even today, this science is still the most secret science. Next word is Shastram Idamuktam. This word can be split into Shastram plus Idam plus Uktam. Shastram means science. Idam means this. Uktam means told. So this has been told. Maya Anagha. Maya plus Anagha. Maya means by me. Anagha means a sinless one. So Arjuna is addressed as sinless one. So what he's telling is, thus, this most secret shastram has been told by me. Instead of I told this shastram, that is a kartari prayogam, this is called as karmani prayogam. This karmani prayogam adds beauty to the verses. That's why this generally the poets prefer to use this karmani prayogam, that is told by me rather than I told. I told will be a simple verse. So let us see the second line meaning of the each word. Next slide, sir. Etat. Etat means this. Tat means that. Paramatma usually referred as tat, tatvamasi. So etat means this. Buddha. Buddha means having understood. It's a past continuous tense. Means having understood, or idannu tilidukondu, like that means something else again you have to do. Not that it does not end here. It's a tva pratyam is used. So continuous tense. There is something else you have to become. That's why the Buddha is used. Buddhiman. Buddhiman means wise, not just knowledgeable. We should become wise. Syat means one becomes. Krutakrutyascha. That can be split into Krutakrutyah plus cha. So this word is very important here. What is meant by Krutakrutyah? So the another word in Sanskrit for Krutakrutyah is Krutartaha. This word we use in Telugu and Kannada also, probably in Hindi also. Krutakrutyah means for example, if you take an example of a student, his job is to read, study, and clear the exams. So if he has done it, means he has done what he is expected to do. So similarly, Krutakrutyah means we, having been born as human beings, what are we expected to do? And you will become that. So what are we expected to do having born as a human beings? Should we become a big doctor or a scientist or a prime minister or a president of the biggest country? So that is still not sufficient. Being born as a human, the main aim is to obtain realization, to become merged with, to become one with the Lord. So if we become that, then we are called as Krutakrutyah. So that is the main purpose of life. This is one of the different, this is what Arsha Vidya says. All our Vedas, Puranas and Upapuranas, they all motivate us to obtain this, to become this Krutakrutyah. Again, last word is Bharata, that is, O Bharata, that is addressing. Lord Krishna addressed Arjuna as Bharata. Bha means knowledge of the self. Ratha means one who revels in the knowledge of the self. So next slide, sir. So let us see the Anvaya of this verse. The first line, Anagha, that is addressing, O sinless Arjuna. Maya idam guhyatamam shastram iti uktam. This most secret science has been told by me, O sinless one. Here, the Lord has addressed Arjuna as Anagha and Bharata in the second line. Anagha as relevant is so told that in order to become Kritakrityaha, one has to become sinless one. So Arjuna is not committed any sin. He is supposed to be most pure, and he does not. His mind is pure, and he does not have any. He has not done any sins, and also he does not have probably vasana rahita probably. So here it indicates that in order to become Kritakrityaha for us, first thing is we should become also sinless. So that's why relevantly the Krishna has addressed Arjuna as Anagha. This most secret science has been told by me. Maya idam guhyatamam shastram iti uktam Bharata. Again, this addressed as Bharata, that is one who revels in the knowledge of the self. Etat buddhva, having known this, buddhiman and Kritakrityaha syat. Become, having known this, be wise and be Kritakrityaha. So you become wise and attain what you are supposed to attain. Here we can also see that in Mahabharata, it is not Arjuna or it is not Bhima who has become Kritakrityaha, but it is only you can see that in the Swargarohana Parva, it is Dharmaraja who has attained who could go up to the heaven or Swarga. I mean, Swarga here it is representative of liberation. So by following Dharmaraja, we will become Kritakrityaha, not by becoming Arjuna or Bhima. They are the most strongest and the best warriors of those times. So that way, this is the completion of the message of the Krishna in the 15th chapter. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Srinivas, for highlighting the meaning of those specific words, Anagha, Bharata, Guhyatamam Shastram, and Maya Uktam. To stress again, I am imparting this to you, O Anagha. So he is saying the knowledge imparted by me. And he says Guhyatamam. And there are two ways of looking at it. One is the Lord himself telling Arjuna that this is a very virtuous, glorious knowledge of myself. And keep it as a secret. Don't reveal it to too many people, which he means don't reveal it to an unprepared mind. But at the same time, it would also probably mean, even if it is told to an unprepared mind or to tell everybody in the whole world, very few would really understand it because it needs that preparedness, it needs the Guru Shastra, and it needs all the sadhana chatushtaya to understand it. The essence of life, discharge all the obligations of our life and attain all the fruits, is mission accomplishment of life. And that is the essence of this word Kritakrityaha. We should become what one should. If we have to have a quick look at the essence of these three phrases that we have probably learned by the end of this session. So the manifest matter is Kṣaraḥ, which is tangible, inert, achetana. It has attributes and hence is saguna. It goes through modifications, savikaram, division, savikalpam, and its dependent existence is why it is called mithya. In the same way, the unmanifest matter is Akṣara, which is intangible. It is inert, but it is the Maya Swarupa. It is achetana, saguna, savikara, savikalpam, and it is also mithya. But the Uttama Purusha, which is the consciousness principle, remains untangible, is sentient. It is a chetana tatva. It is beyond the three gunas, hence it is gunatita or nirguna. It is nirvikara, nirvikalpam. It has independent existence and hence it is satyam. It also lends existence. It is the sarva adhara. It is the highest ever, and that is the consciousness principle, which is the Purushottama. May I now request Srimati Triveni to chant this verses of this session, verses 16 to 20.
Thank you, sir. Vavimau purushau loke kṣaraṣ eva ca kṣaraṣ sarvani bhutani kūtastokṣara uchyate Uttamaḥ puruṣastvanyah paramatyethyudahrutaḥ
यो लोकत्रयमाविश्य बिभर्त्यव्यय ईश्वरः यस्मात् क्षरमतीतोऽहम् अक्षरादपि चोत्तमः अतोऽस्मि लोके वेदे च प्रतितः पुरुषोत्तमः यो मामेवमसम्मूढः जानाति पुरुषोत्तमम् स सर्वविद् भजति मां सर्वभावेन भारत इति गुह्यतमं शास्त्रम् इदमुक्तं मया नघ एतद्बुद्ध्वा बुद्धिमान् स्यात् कृतकृत्यश्च भारत ॐ तत्सदिति श्रीमद्भगवद्गीतासु उपनिषत्सु ब्रह्मविद्यायां योगशास्त्रे श्रीकृष्णार्जुनसंवादे पुरुषोत्तमयोगो नाम पञ्चदशोऽध्यायः। ॐ तत्सत् हरिः ॐ।
Friends, we shall be back on the 30th September, the 117th session, which is summarization of this small but extremely important 5th chapter to help us register and recall the teachings. Before that, join us at 6:45 p.m. local time on Monday, 26th September for our 28th session of Disha, for discovery of inner strength and happiness, for a holistic understanding of one topic and concept explained from two texts. From Bhagavad Gita chapter 6, covering the 4th part of Dhyana Yoga, with reference to verses 33 to 36, Dhyana Pratibandha and Parihara shall be explained. From Upasana Yoga topic in Tattva Bodha, Daivi Sampat and Asari Sampat, divine and demonic thought patterns shall be explained. I would like to express our hearty thanks to everyone for joining us in today's study. Thanks to all our Param Vedanta teachers for the excellent presentations with illustrative slides and also for the melodious chanting of the verses. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.